Hi, we're here today to talk about what your business should be doing to maximize the chances of securing investment. Just by way of background, my name is Ukie and I head up the games team at Lee Thompson. We're a team of 8 dedicated games specialist lawyers and part of a bigger firm of 65 lawyers covering aspects of the creative industries. We've got years of experience in the game sector. For example, I was head of legal and general at Codemasters for over 8 years, and then after that at the BBC Studios, heading up their games team. So in terms of today, we're going to be looking at 3 main areas. Firstly, how you protect your intellectual property as a business and your ideas is fundamentally important for a as a business. Secondly, we will look at how you protect your people and the relationships you have with key staff. And thirdly, how your business, how your company is set up in terms of governance, and to make sure that you're maximizing the chances of success when seeking to secure investment. So turning first to intellectual property protection. When we refer and use the term intellectual property, really this is an umbrella term for a collection of rights, primarily copyright, trademarks, whether they're registered or unregistered, patents, design rights. Video games are a collection of multiple rights. It is vitally important are able to recognize what intellectual property rights you own and also potentially do not own and require a license for. The extent to which you need to protect both your company name and also your key brands in your games. You also need to think about how you protect, to the best of your ability, the ideas that you have, because we'll get into it shortly. Copyright in itself protects the expression of an idea, but not necessarily the idea itself. And also, it's important to think, why is this important for answer? If you're an investor, if you're a publisher, you need to have the certainty that the business you are investing potentially in owns or is entitled to license the IP rights in the games and in the business itself. So just dealing with the concept of ensuring that you protect your ideas. As I mentioned, copyright does not protect the idea itself, but it protects the expression of an idea. The classic kind of example is there's lots of novels in the world about wizards, but there's only one Harry Potter. It's how that idea is expressed from a point of view that is the key. And that was one of the elements of the dispute between PUBG and Fortnite. How you can protect the idea, the concept that PUBG came up with. here's another example here in terms of Caterpillar Man and Pac-Man. Just the concept of having being chased by a series of bad guys in some form of typographical arrangement in itself was found not to be protectable under copyright law. So it's really important when you are speaking to anyone in terms of esports that it's possible some form of non-disclosure agreement with. Whilst this isn't perfect, it would be better than having in place. At least you can then point to the fact that if certain ideas come out of meetings with other guys, that you've got some form of document to point to say you're a breach potentially of confidence. So really important that you have non-disclosure arrangements in place, particularly to protect things like patent software, for example. So the primary IP right affecting video games is copyright. Copyright is an automatic right. It's not a right that you would seek to register in the world. So, for example, in the US, you are able to register copyright, but it's an automatic right. And judgment involved in the content that you are creating. As soon as you write a piece of code, there is potential copyright in that piece of code. So you see copyright in all sorts of aspects of video games, in scripts, the lyrics, the text, vocalization of the game, in the computer programs themselves, in the code. There's artistic copyright in lovely artwork, in sculptures, street art, marketing materials and icons that are in the game. There's also musical copyright in the sound recording, the public performances of the game. So copyright is essential to the protection of your game, and the nice thing is it's automatic right. So here's just an example of the multiple copyright works and rights existing in just one screen grab of a video game. It just gives you an idea of the vast amount of copyright material and potential protectable IP in your game. So it's really important that you ensure that you're protected in your game. Another really important aspect of IP that will be your brand, both for example, the name of your company, but also your game name or characters within your game. It's important that you seek to try and protect those brands and those names as far as either as a registered trademark, or you can rely upon the lesser right of unregistered trademarks. What do I mean by a registered trademark? A registered trademark is a trademark that you've applied to register within a particular territory, for the US or Europe. And that mark, after it's gone through a particular process, is then put a public register and will give you exclusivity, the use of that particular name or brand in respect of certain goods and services, typically client to get. It's a registered trademark. It's a very useful right to use and to rely upon to prevent anyone else ripping off your brand or name, even if it's not an identical use, if you're doing something which is similar to your brand or name, you can use registered trademarks to enforce those rights quickly and easily. You don't just stop. It's difficult to rely upon unregistered trademark law, the law of passing off, because there's quite a big burden in being able to show that you've generated enough goodwill or have enough reputation in a particular brand name. The other thing about trademarks is it's relatively quick and relatively cheap to protect your name. UK, typically costs would be, just in terms of the registry costs, would be around £250 to apply to register your brand for video games in two classes. And in theory, it's a perpetual right, provided that you continue to pay your renewal fees. So it's really important IP right. Patents is another important registered IP right. There's probably less patents out there in terms of video games, certainly in comparison to trademark, but particularly for things like protecting your proprietary technology, patents can be really important. The patentability of software per se can be difficult, particularly in the UK, less so in the US and probably midpoint in Europe. But there are ways and means by which you can obtain patent protection, and there's numerous things in the video game space, whether it's ghost cars or it's communications or dancing games. There's numerous patents out there. When you apply to protect them, the invention must be new, which means it mustn't already be known in the public space, and that's why it's really important to again think about that non-disclosure agreement that we spoke about earlier. If your idea, if your invention is now known in the public space, that will immediately disqualify it for being patentable. So really just think about long-term gain. In terms of patents, they are expensive. It can be very expensive to obtain patents for your business, for example, in terms of middleware. And it may be that you then wish to license out that patented tech going forward. Then that investment may well be something you're happy to do. And also, investors really like patents. It's a strong registered IP. There's value in that patents in terms of your ability to license that patented technology, but also in terms of enforcing your right and other companies from seeking to rip off your tech and your tech. Registered design rights are also another useful registered IP to look at for games. Really useful for protecting aspects such as the user interface and icons of characters within the game. The nice thing about them is they're quite quick and cheap to secure. If you're looking at putting together a big bank of registered IP and you don't want to go to the expense of patents, then design right is definitely something useful to look at. So just to sum up on the IP front, anything you can possibly do to maximize the protection of your IP in your business, you should do, if at all possible. Obviously, it's always subject to budgets and costs, and you've got to draw the line somewhere. But in terms of your key IP, whether it's your key brands in your game, your company name, key characters that you've developed, key technology that you want to protect, even if you're just protecting it in terms of having robust confidentiality provisions in place, making sure that you have a clean desk policy and you've got necessary securities in the office. Anything you can do to demonstrate to the investors that you have built up a portfolio of protectable and value your business, and it will make you more investable in. So we're now going to talk about your people. In addition to your IP, your people are crucial to your business. So by people, I mean by whom your form contribute to the running of your studio, the running of your business. And we all know that that may be a combination of employees in the traditional sense, but also consultants, colleagues, sometimes friends, advisors. It's really, really important that you've got an understanding of the legal status of all this work. Not just for your staff, but generally across the board. Have written contracts in place for all key aspects of the business. Why is it important from an individual point of view? Well, again, thinking about intellectual property, it's really important that you can demonstrate to the business owns all the IP in the business. It's not retained, for example, by an individual or a contractor or a consultant that's worked for you. Under the law of copyright, copyright is only transferred if it's transferred in writing and it's signed by both parties. So it's really, really important that you have decent contracts in place with both your staff, but also any third parties you use, to ensure that any of the IP that they create in the course of doing work for the business, that those IP rights are transferred over to the business. It's also making sure that you can demonstrate to potential investors all the IP that they are potentially investing in is retained, owned, or licensed validly to the business. So that means things like trademarks, registrations, making sure it's the business that applies to register rather than an individual employee. It's making sure that, again, any contracts in place with any of your staff, there's clear IP provisions in there which transfer over IP to the business. It's also thinking about things like any of the projects that staff have got on. Are you happy that the guys are going to be able to retain the rights in some of their side projects? It may well be that you are, but you should be clear about that now, have a policy in place and document a process, so there's never any argument or ambiguity as to who owns the IP. You'll have robust confidentiality provisions in all your contracts, again to safeguard any know-how, any key know-how of the business that can't always be written down, can't always be protectable as an IP right, and that's set out in your contract. There's a list there of different types of contracts in place. Employment contracts, obviously, for employees. Consultancy agreements is being contracted in some shape or form by the business. And service agreements are things like agreements for directors. Okay, we're now going to talk about business setup. Take a step back. Put yourself in the shoes of an investor. Just think about, how is your business set up for investment? activity. Have you set up the company as a limited company, for example? Do you have a proper structure in place? Do you have governance in place? Or is it simply a group of friends at the moment? Or are you acting as a sole trader? The legal status of your business is important. What kind of plan do you have in place for the business and any investment plans? In fact, do you have a plan in place at all at the moment? What's your strategy? Who are you doing business with? Who are your key guys, your key personnel? Who are the essential guys that you need to be able to take the business to the next level? Have you got the right personnel in place now to help with it? Ask the question, would you invest in your business at the moment? The vast majority of studios, developers, publishers are set up as limited liability companies. Why are they set up as limited liability companies? Well, a number of reasons, but as a founder of a business, by setting up a limited liability company, you are limiting the exposure you have personally in terms of the business, and also in terms of as a vehicle to secure investment. It's usually the best legal instrument to use to grow and expand the business. You should think about company structure. Have you registered your company at Companies House? I mentioned if in terms of your company name, have you registered that as a trademark? Is it potentially registrable? Have you conducted any searches to check you're not potentially infringing anyone else's trademark? Who owns the business? Is it just you as an individual? Directors, do you have them from the investors, or of equal importance, is it their experience? Do you want investors with money and experience in the game sector who can help grow your business going forward? What kind of shares have you currently got in place? If you have shares in place, as the founder, do you have the majority of the shares? And also, what rules are governing ownership of the shares and what you can do as a business? What kind of articles of association, the rules of the company, are currently in place? You may well need a shareholders agreement to govern how shareholders run and operate and can trade shares and currencies in or the extent to which board decisions are made, who has the power in terms of making decisions as the director. All of these things will need to be looked at by a lawyer. Think about what governance structures you've got in place. Again, investors like well-run businesses where you can demonstrate you have clear processes in place for each aspect of the business. What happens if things go wrong? Do you have a disaster recovery process? Do you have board minutes in place? Do you file your accounts with Companies House? Anything you can do to demonstrate that actually you take your responsibility seriously as a business, that you're well run, organised, efficient, is important. You may also want to think, depending upon the type of investment you're wishing to secure, on how the group structure of your business is established. For example, It may be for tax reasons that you wish to set up individual subsidiary companies. These are called single purpose vehicles company. Quite often the IP of a particular game, for example, will be retained solely within that subsidiary company, and that can be attractive to investors because they know if they invest in a particular subsidiary company that they're having security over all the IP in the game that resides within that company. So we've kind of touched on this already. What kind of investment are you seeking to secure? Are you investing project brings looking for publishers to develop? It may be you're looking for that kind of investment as opposed to company-wide investment. Are you looking to cash flow your business? Are you looking to secure a loan, for example? Have you considered video games tax credits, which can often be used as a security to secure a cash flow loan? Who are you talking to? Again, is it VCs, venture capitalists, or is it rich individual angels, or is it a combination of both? And who are you after in terms of the investor? The other thing to mention is in terms of your advisors and who you work with, make sure you fit, make sure you're dealing with people who are giving you close support from an early stage, whether it's accountants or lawyers, and that they understand their business well, ideally that they're games accountants or lawyers. They've got significant amounts of experience. They can be really useful and helpful from the outset, just to make sure that you're starting off in the right footing and you're not making any do anything that may come back haunting. Also, be realistic about time frames. Do your homework. Make sure that your investment is really good, that you know it inside out, that you know your numbers inside out. And when you're looking at investors, try and choose investors not just simply for the money, but although obviously the money is important, but think about the longer term relationship. This may well be the beginning of a series of financing guides in the long term, so it's important that you choose the right guides from the outset. So this completes the talk for today, the presentation for today. I'm conscious we've really rattled through lots of different areas over a very short time frame. So if you do have any follow-up questions or any other areas you want to talk about, feel free to drop me an email at julianward@leanthompson.com, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions you've got. Thanks a lot.